welcome everyone to our romance panel. Probably my favorite panel of the day, honestly. I shouldn't say that, but I love romance.
She says that every panel.
These are recorded. So thank you to our authors for being here today and being willing to talk about your work and your books and the process and all of that. It is very fun to hear about. So what we'll do first is have everyone go down the line and introduce yourself and talk about the books that you write. Sabrina? Sabrina Wagner?
There it is. I am Sabrina Wagner, and I write contemporary romance. They're on the spicy side, like a 3 out of 5 chili peppers. Some of my favorite tropes are second chance and enemies to lovers. So I try to tear all my characters apart before I put them back together.
So sorry, real quick, I didn't mention it before, but we don't have to hold the mics that close. That one is ramped up pretty loud because it's better for the video. So, just be comfortable with it.
Do I need to use it?
If you don't want to, you don't have to.
My name is Kelly.
My name is Kelly Aten. I write speculative fiction, so sci-fi, fantasy, steampunk, paranormal, you name it. I write speculative fiction, but I also balance it equal parts with sapphic romance, which is romance between 2 women. Any sexuality, it doesn't matter. It could be bi, pan, lesbian, doesn't matter. It's just 2 women in a romance going through stuff in the speculative fiction context.
I'm KJ Sinclair. I write overall queer fiction. I don't kind of particularly stick to any genre. I've done paranormal, I've done dark, I've done cozy fantasy. The only thing that draws all of my, and I'm working on romantic tragedy right now, the only thing that does draw my stories together is that there is some form of queer relationship in them.
Hello, I am I am Porsha Deun. I am a multi-genre author, so including romance, I also write erotica, children's book, a devotional. I have a fantasy book coming out next month, so I kind of do a little bit of whatever kind of comes to my mind and heart with that one.
That is scary.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I'll turn it down a little bit. You could go ahead.
Oh, wait, about this one.
No, I'm good.
I turned it down a little bit.
Oh, did you?
I did.
All right, we'll give it a go.
Okay.
Oh, that's way better.
Hi, I'm Meika Usher. Whoa, that's still really loud. And I write contemporary romance, romantic comedies. These can be a little bit spicy depending on where you start in my backlist. First 2 books, not so much. By the time you get to the 3rd book or last book, there's 3 chapters back to back of smut. So depending on what you're looking for, I've got you covered. If you pick up one of my books, they're going to be snarky and sexy, but they're also going to have a lot of found family and inclusiveness, and they get gayer as I go, so that's a lot of fun.
We are booking with my contemporary romance.
Awesome. All right, so my first question is for everyone. I would love to hear from all of you. Yeah, I did that last time.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. You guys are like magnetic or something. Well, I would love to hear from all of you why you write romance.
Yes.
Sabrina?
I write romance. I've been a romance reader since I was a teenager. I started back with the Sweet Valley High books, and that probably ages me a lot. But I started reading those back in elementary school. So I have always been a romance reader, and then I became a teacher. So I always had these stories in my head, but it was just, I was raised that you do a job where you can make some money. And writing is not a job where you can make some money. So I became a teacher, and then my sister got diagnosed with cancer, and I was like, what the heck am I doing? I would like to do something that I want to do, and so that encouraged me to follow my own dream and to start writing, and that was the extra push that I needed to do that.
That is the best life is short story I think I've ever heard.
Thank you.
Life is short, do what you love.
Yes.
I too read a lot of romance when I was a kid. I also read science fiction and fantasy. So, and I think when I came out later, like in my mid to late 20s, 20s, and I didn't see a lot of books out there of all the things that I liked in one book. And so, and I was not a writer, I accidentally started writing, and I finished a story once, and it was 68,000 words, and I said, wow, that's a book. And it's like a switch flipped. And I've had, I think, the greatest compliment, or one of the greatest compliments I've ever received from a reader who messaged me and said, I write the kind of books that they wish they had as a queer kid growing up. The things that combine all of those elements that they love, like science fiction, fantasy, and some sort of queer or female-female romance. So, and I write what I love to read myself, and that is what I read, so that's why I write it.
Yeah. I write romance because, especially in a queer MM setting, whether that be, you know, male, MX, male non-binary, a lot of the stories that exist were written for us. They weren't written by us. That shifted in the early 2000s and started to become more common in the late 2010s, early 2020s, with the rise of authors who are on the more problematic side now, but authors like T.J. Klune, authors like M.A. Wardell. So it's only recent, within the last 10 years, that it has become common for MM stories to be written by men, and non-binary stories to be written by non-binary people, and sapphic stories to be written by sapphic identified people, bisexual women, lesbians, trans women. It's recent, and I was part of that that kind of push as a group of, we're writing our own stories because we're tired of the way that people are writing our stories for us. So that was what specifically drove me into romance more than anything, because even though I write fantasy and romantasy and paranormal, stuff like that, I want what comes from my story to be at least mildly relatable to my audience. So that was what specifically drove me into queer romance.
So for me, writing romance, like others said, I grew up reading romance. I was that kid that snuck off with my aunt or grandmother's books that I should not have been reading as a child.
Learned a lot about the Amish in my teens.
Or even, you know, dating myself over here, sitting at Borders and sitting on the floor in there until they kicked me out. You know, sitting here reading books that I should not have been reading as a teenager. So romance was always like my first love. It's always what I wanted to write. The other genres that I started writing kind of just sort of happened and came along, but like romance that is my first love for reading and writing, even watching movies or whatnot. Like, just give me something that's gonna make me swoon and, you know, do all this.
I mean, yeah, echoing what everybody else said, I've been reading romance. Still my mom's. I was in romances.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
But I think that the biggest reason why I write romance is because the world sucks, and we need a happy ever after. And the only place that we're doing it these days is in romance novels. So I think it's super important, especially now, to remember that's why we're writing love stories, because it can seem trivial sometimes to, you know, write the books, these like light, fluffy books, so to speak. But people need an escape, and I put that to them, so that's what it is.
This is so true. So I'm gonna use the mic because I'm a soft speaker. So I'm gonna use it. My first like individual question is for Meika. I love the topic of escapism and having fun, you know, with your art. On your website, your book, Hard to Handle, is described like this. A grumpy cinnamon roll bartender lets a cranky vagabond comic book artist crash on his couch, but you know she doesn't stay there for long because boning. They're totally boning. I laughed out loud at that. And it just like made me think of how fun romance is. So like, is it your goal to make your books fun? It sounds like you want them to be an escape for people.
Yeah, absolutely, that's my goal. When you pick up one of my books, I want you to feel like welcome, like you're in a world where, you know, it's a nice place to be, you know, like everybody's welcome, everybody is kind, and, you know, obviously there's struggles, you know, everybody has their own struggles. There's a little bit of mixed, but at the end of the day, it's a warm, cozy escape from reality for a while, and that's always been my goal when I'm writing.
Can you talk about Hard to Handle?
Yeah, Hard to Handle is the second in the How You Get the Girl series. This is the first book. That one was a little bit difficult to write because Anya, the main character, is a pain in the ass. And she was really hard to nail down, but I really liked the dynamic of the grumpy, because they're both cranky people, and at the end of the day, they kind of found a safe space in being cranky with each other, so that was a lot of fun to write.
Lovely. And then my next question is for Porsha. Just going down the line. So you graduated from Davenport University with a BBA in accounting, right?
Yeah.
And then you wrote Love Lost, which was nominated for an AANBC 2019 Urban Fiction of the Year Award. And your second novel, Love Lost Forever, was a finalist for Romance Slam Jam's 2020 Emma Award. So how did you go from accounting to writing award-winning romance?
The economy sucks. When I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I had a hard time finding a job. I went months where I was looking for a job and wasn't hearing back from anyone and doing interview after interview, and then, like I would imagine, most of us up here would say that, you kind of have always been a writer, and even as a kid wrote stories and stuff. And so,
Except for me.
so during that time of unemployment and kind of having a whole lot of extra time on my hands outside of, looking for a job and doing interviews, the story kind of came to me, and like when I sat down to start writing, I wrote out what was then the first 6 chapters of the first draft. And so I have just been kind of continuing to write ever since then. But essentially, like, it wasn't intentional on my part. Again, the economy sucks.
Can you talk about Love Lost?
Yes, so that is my very first book. It is a second chance romance that is actually set in Flint. So if you are familiar with the Flint area, yes. There's locations and stuff in there that you'll see. So like the court downtown is mentioned in there, La Familia, stuff like that is in there. But the main character, Elise, she has a fashion boutique business that's her own that she built from the ground up. In the story, it's located where Elga is currently at downtown Flint. Elga announced they were moving into that spot 3 months before my book released, and I said, I'm not changing it. So it's set there, and then this guy who Elise was once involved with, there's a little bit of BDSM in this story. But
I'm sold.
But they, used to be play partners or whatever, and they had this thing going, and then he abruptly ended it, and then 4 years later, he comes back into her life, and she's trying to resist him, she fails at it. And their romance kind of takes off from there, and some people in her life are like great, and it benefits her in so many ways, and then there's other people that are around her like, yeah, I really don't want y'all to be together, and I'm gonna do everything I can to take y'all and tear y'all apart, and people get crazy. So, yeah.
So that was called Love Lost?
Yes, so that's the first book, it's the first book of the trilogy, so it's a 3-book series, but yeah.
Know what I'm doing when I get home.
I love books set in the state. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
It's set in the
Yeah.
All right. And my next question is for KJ. So The Royal Day is a queer fantasy romance. It's ultimately about self-discovery. Why do you think that romance and self-discovery often go hand in hand?
Do you want the PG answer or the rated R answer?
The rated R answer.
Okay, perfect. So there is something so inherently important that we learn as adults about the intersection of sexuality and self-exploration. And it's not just learning what you like, it's learning who you are as a person. There are a lot of things that you can learn about yourself through romance, both sexually and romantically. Especially when you come to the intersection that is romance and queerness. That is, it's almost impossible for those two roads to not intersect. So when it comes to most queer romance, you will find some form of self-learning, self-expression, self-understanding, because while you're learning about yourself sexually, you're learning about yourself romantically in these scenarios. And when it comes to writing, obviously, art is our interpretation of the way we see the world. So you'll see it constantly, and I'm sure that anyone on this panel can back me up here, whether it be Black experience, whether it be straight experience, whether it be sapphic experience, you will learn so much more about yourself and your soul in the bedroom than you will almost anywhere else.
What a line, yeah, that's so true.
It's not just about, you know, what you find out that you're into. You do some heavy soul searching. Pardon my language, a little bit of silicone in your bed.
I mean, I will agree with you, because I did not realize at all that I wasn't straight until I discovered fan fiction, queer fan fiction online. And it was like a big old light bulb went off over my head. I had been in a like 8-year relationship, was engaged to a man, and it just wasn't right. And it was just like click, click. Oh no.
And it is one thing to learn about it and hear about it, is another thing to experience it for yourself. And that's not just sexually. It is
It's everything.
you
It's
learn
like, wow.
about the inner workings of your mind in the middle of a relationship.
Great. Okay, so the next question is for Kelly. Hey, Aten. I don't know if you brought the book with you, but in the last Sign on a Rock, that's your band's right, the last Sign on a Rock,
Sign on a Rock,
your
yeah.
main character, Kaylin, tries to navigate her new life on Earth while she's falling in love with a genius CEO. How do you write characters that have to balance their, personal responsibilities and identities, along with, falling in love with someone and trying to build a life with them?
So one of the things that I think I pride myself on is, because I write so many different genres and subgenres, science fiction, fantasy, dystopian, steampunk, like all of it, sometimes a lot of it in the same book. But the thing is, all of my books start with the storyline, or the plot, or the premise, or whatever you want to call it. They start there. I secretly love that idea of like romance and the romantic connection. So that's what happens, but they happen pretty equally. But I try to keep it believable, because I don't like being kicked out of a story. I have read speculative fiction. I do a ton of research just on my speculative fiction, on my science fiction, just to make sure things are as real as possible. Because you want your reader to fully immerse themselves. As a reader, I like to fully immerse. So I try to look at a relationship, and I try to look at the things that you deal with, even though this is say a science fiction, or in this case, a superhero setting. Like, what are the things that real people deal with in their life, in their job, in their career, in their romance? So balancing, I think it's kind of easy for me. I don't like reading books that have fabricated romantic elements, like throw in this angsty moment just for the sake of doing it. Artificial conflict. We all know when there's artificial conflict. It's like, literally you could have said 10 words to each other, and this entire half a book would have gone away because there would be no conflict. So I like to write intelligent people. I try to write emotionally intelligent people. Not everyone qualifies. But I think that, balancing comes easy if you just start with the premise, like, get in your character's head. What would they do? What would I do? Because we write ourselves into a lot of these characters. It's like, is somebody cheating on me? It's like, immediately listen to everybody around and like, oh no, you're cheating, right? It doesn't happen, I don't like cheating, but anyway. What would your characters realistically do? How would they balance their lives? How do we all balance our lives every day? We have to go to work, we have to do this, we have to do that. Maybe you have to fly off and save the world, I don't know. It happens, sometimes. So, I think if you just write your characters naturally, and you try to keep the situations real world responsive, like, it'll balance out.
What did you write last time you brought? When did you write that one?
When did I write it? A few years ago. It's my second superhero book, and I conceived of it and wrote it into an already existing superhero world. It takes place like 18 years later. So there's already established kind of like a meta type created humans that have powers called chromatics. So this actually is an alien that lands, and you know there are other aliens on the world, but a lot of the people are chromatics. It was actually my nod to the Supergirl fandom. But when I wrote this, it was such an alternate view to the Supergirl story. I actually wrote it always intending for it to be in this world. I actually had to change a bunch of stuff in order to make it fan fiction, which is what it originally was put out as. So I had to change a lot back to make it fan fiction from what I had originally conceived of it in this chromatic world. So it is, there are two. They are some characters, but it's 18 years apart, so.
I love Supergirl, I love that. That's wonderful. All right, and my next question is for Sabrina. In your Vegas series, which I think you brought some of them, you have tropes such as friends with lovers, secret identity, the single dad, falling for the nanny, opposites attract, and of course your other books have a lot more romance themes. I love in romance when we can have fun with these tropes. What has been your favorite trope to write, and then also, what's the hardest?
I'm gonna start with the hardest.
Okay.
I actually, this is the last book of my Vegas. It actually comes out on Tuesday, so it's not available anywhere else right now. This was a friends to lovers. Very hard to write friends to lovers because where's the conflict? You already like each other so much. So this was a secret identity. She came to Vegas and he doesn't know who she really is. So that's where the conflict came in. She's actually an heiress, and she has kept her identity a secret for a reason. So that's where I kind of got the conflict. I was like, these two are like perfect for each other. Where's the conflict in this book? So I found friends to lovers really hard to write. Enemies to lovers, and I don't think I've ever written a true enemies to lovers. It's more dislike to lovers.
Right.
Because enemies is more like they're bullies and whatever.
Or just friction to lovers, like butting heads.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
more dislike to lovers. That is a lot of fun to write because they're always doing little things to needle at each other, little things to get each other's goats. And there's just the conflict kind of writes itself. One of my favorite characters to write was actually the third book in this series, which was the Falling for the Nanny romance.
Yeah.
He is just an onion, and he is absolutely hated in this book. He's the brother of this guy, absolutely hated. You'll love him by the end of the third book, though. But he's a terrible person. He's just an awful, terrible person who says whatever he wants to say, and then you kind of realize that as you pull back all the layers to him, why he is the way he is. But the conflict between the nanny and him, because she was kind of Pollyanna, you know, doing her job, and he was just kind of, but he was in love with her at the same time. So that was fun. I mean, I like that dislike to lovers.
That sounds like fun. It sounds like you have like discovered or been able to like develop identities through certain tropes.
Yeah, I think so. The next book I'm writing, which is actually kind of a funny story. So I started writing this book 3 years ago, and it's only got 2 chapters done. Because it was going to be it was gonna be a brand new series after the Forever Inked series. And then, anyways, I have to go back. So the trope for that one is gonna be brother's best friend, which I've never written before. So I think that's gonna be kind of fun. And the reason I didn't write it is because this book was never supposed to happen. This book I answered a Facebook ad for. I answered an ad, there was someone who was looking for 15 authors to write kind of interrelated Vegas books, and they were supposed to be novellas, which this is not exactly a novella. It was supposed to be 25 to to 50K words.
Okay.
Mine was 66, it was the longest, but it was the shortest I could write. And I had to stay with that collaboration for 6 months. But as the reviews started coming in, people wanted to know about the side characters. So after that 6 months, I pulled it from the collaboration and it became its whole own series. And actually, this has done well for me. But it was not something I was ever planning on writing. And I do love it.
That's interesting. That's crazy.
Because now I'm worried about, like, if I'm going back to this other world, because this was the series of, it was the Millionaires, I don't know what it was about this series that people really liked. If it was the Millionaires, or the writing has gotten better, I don't really know.
Okay, well, I'll just ask my second question to you now. So I've been following Sabrina's newsletter for probably a year now. She has an excellent newsletter. I love, talking to authors about how they market themselves. It's not an easy thing to do, but how do you go about that? And if you talk about the ways that you connect with readers, like in the real world or online?
Sure. The newsletter is just one little piece of that. I try to do a monthly newsletter. Some people are much better, they do weekly. I just don't have that bandwidth. And in my newsletter, I talk about what's going on in my writing world, and then I talk about my events. I usually have a drink recipe and another little article on blog or something, and then I recommend 2 books that I've read, that I've enjoyed. I am on social media every day except Saturday and Sunday. That's still my weekend. That's my teacher mentality. It's still my weekend. The marketing is 80% of the job once you've written the book. People think they're going to write a book and it's just going to sell. It's not going to sell if you don't market it. Sorry. It is 80% of the job, and it does take a lot of time to connect with people, to respond to their responses, to kind of be on all the time. You have to be on if you don't interconnect with people, because they're falling in love with you as an author. They're not necessarily falling in love with your books. You're marketing yourself, not just your books.
Okay, great answer. Kevin, have more questions? Did you bring Burn It Down with you by chance? In Burn It Down, the main character deals with a lot of childhood trauma and guilt. Can you talk about that book? And why do you think the romance genre specifically helps people cope with trauma and hard times?
I think both romance and speculative fiction in general help people, I guess, deal with things like trauma. And the nice thing about speculative fiction, I've said it many times, is that you can deal with things like systemic abuse in a setting that isn't automatically triggering. When you put something like racism into a fantastical world or a science fiction world, you can deal with some of these things. And the same thing with trauma, you can kind of deal with that. But I think the romance aspect helps soften the material that you're reading. So this book I actually refer to as my cry book, because every time when I wrote it, every time I edited it, anytime I've gone back and reread it, people that read it tell me the same thing, like they cry. I don't know where it came from, honestly, but it's about a Detroit firefighter who has to go to mandated therapy. It's on the back. Has to go to mandated therapy because her best friend and almost brother, like lifelong, they grew up together, also was a firefighter. They called them the Three Stooges. She could only save one of the guys, and not her best friend. And her best friend was awake and said, save him, because he has kids. So she had to make that call and leave her best friend behind to die. And she didn't deal with it well. She had to go to therapy as well as heal from her injuries. But problem with therapy is therapy will bring up other stuff, and that's where we get into the childhood trauma. And the thing that, I don't just write heroines, right, that overcome adversity, that embrace their flaws, while actively searching to be better people. I do like to write that in almost all of my books, if not all of them. But I also have been told that I write hope. I write the light in the dark. I know a lot of readers, myself included, who want to read something that gives them hope, right? And I was told by one of my, I call them super fans, you know, all of us authors, we know people that we are an automatic buy. As soon as we publish a book, they're on it. So I call them my super fans, and that feedback we get from them is amazing. But I was told by one of my super fans that she said she read everything that Ash went through in this book, and she got to see her come out the other side. This friend, the super fan, she deals with depression. She's dealt with past abuse, and she said that, you know, that this character came out healthier, happier, and on her way to wholeness, and that just reading the possibility, the hope, gave her hope in her life too. And that is something that is a really amazing feeling, that sometimes as an author, life as an author can beat you down, right? Negative reviews will cut twice as deep as, you know, any spoken criticism, to be honest. Readers have power over us and our inspiration. But on the other hand, we have power over readers as well. The power to make people laugh, to make people cry, rage, and love, right? So, and one of those powers is hope. And so I like to balance that romance with the trauma, with the adversity, to show that even when things are dark, you can find those little pinpoints of light and carry them with you.
I love that. I feel like that deserves That's so sweet. I hate crying, but I love it.
I love it, it's cathartic.
Yeah. Alright, next question is for AJ.
What?
I know, right? You already kind of talked about it earlier, but do you want to talk more about the importance of writing queer romance, and then talk about the two
Yeah.
who you have there with you?
So, like I was kind of piggybacking off my point earlier, queer romance, albeit sapphic actually took forever to get published and to be seen. But queer,
It's been published for like 4 decades, but it's been back alleys,
Yeah.
wrapped in brown paper bags, getting mailed directly to people's houses.
Now, nobody would like.
even now it's hard
It's
to
just now
sell
hitting
them.
mainstream, just
But
now.
then you have the opposite of that, which is, you know, queer male fiction, which has existed for centuries and then was outlawed and then brought back. You know, you kind of have those two opposite spectrums there, where one was tolerable because it was, you know, viewed as romantic, the other was viewed as disgusting and kind of pushed off to the back burner until it was to the point where no one could deny that it existed anymore. But there was this massive push during the AIDS pandemic for queer stories, specifically male queer stories, to be written, because the people that could tell those stories were dying. There's no sugarcoating. So that was what caused such a massive spark in books and queer books in the 80s, was the AIDS pandemic. And my job now as a 30-year-old author, I'm saying 30 because I'm not telling you what after 30. As a 30-year-old author in 2025, my job is to continue that legacy. But at the beginning of it, because we didn't exist, or we were slowly dying out, it was on the shoulders of straight women. And for a while it worked, and then for a while it didn't work, and then for a while it kind of worked, and now what we're seeing, and those of us that have been authors who have a very heavy social media profile over the last couple of years have seen, is this massive divide between readers who want to read that his own voice, and sapphic that his own voice, and trans stories that are own voice, and black stories that are own voice, and stories that are written by people that they're comfortable looking at. And that is what drives me, and especially those of you that know my husband, Jonathan Hawker, he was here as well, what drives both of us to write what we write, because at this point in time, there is no one that can tell a story better than the person who lives that experience. Now, obviously, you know, I'm not fucking skinwalkers. I'm not shape-shifting into minotaurs. I'm not, you know, obviously. I know, right? I seem like the type, don't I? But when you can take these stories, these themes, you can take these themes and you can make a story that might not be palatable for someone who doesn't want that real world gut punch, someone who doesn't want to experience the harshness of the Jim Crow era, someone who doesn't want to experience the harshness of the AIDS pandemic, someone who doesn't want to experience the harshness of what happens to marginalized communities in this day and age, let alone 40, 50 years ago. But they want to take that and kind of sample it, not in a bad way. They want to understand without that harsh impact. You can take stories like these as a queer person and you can write your experiences into fantasy. You can take the stories that you've lived and kind of form them into something that is enjoyable, that is uplifting, while still shows the plight of what you've had to experience and what those before you've had to experience. And it's really what drives most authors now, especially authors of color, authors who are queer, authors who are disabled. That's a huge one that we do not talk about at all for some reason. The amount of, I mean, I have a fairly decent social media following, and I also run a Discord server that is, I think we were at about 800 people now, and it's half artists, half readers. The amount of disabled authors that are just simply pushed to the side because they're disabled. Meanwhile, what's that show that just blew up on Netflix last year? The dating with autism one.
Love on the Spectrum.
What is it? Love on the Spectrum. Love on the, what, that was a conversation that was happening in Discord as that was airing. It is the way that blew up. Completely blew up. I was like, oh my God, it's so cute. I love these people. Meanwhile, disabled people are like, no, this is exploitative. These people are not signing these contracts. Their parents, their guardians are signing them for them. And the same thing happened to queer people. The same thing happened to Black and brown people. It's when you see yourself represented in the media the way that you do not, you do something about it. That's exactly what led to these and the Royal They, what led to Burn It Down, what led to Addict, sorry. Red is a really hard color for me. What led to Addict, what led to these stories. And we just shape ourselves into them so that we can tell our stories to people who don't necessarily want to read them until they've already read them. Sorry, that was ranty.
What an answer.
That was so long-winded, I'm sorry.
I learned a lot.
But also there's this element of self-discovery there.
Yeah.
Like for me, for example, I'm bisexual, and I didn't quite know I was bisexual until like, I was with a woman. It was the other way around. I was with a woman for a long time, and then it was like, it was like, oh shit, I liked it too.
Yep. Hey, I ain't gonna fault you there.
Yeah, and so it took me a minute to get comfortable with that part of my identity, and that's actually like, this book here is my first like on-page bisexual character.
Yep.
It took me 4 books to get here.
Yeah, well, and it is. It's double-sided. As much as we want to tell our stories, we also learn a lot about ourselves writing these characters. And most of these characters write themselves, and we're just along for the journey.
It's an incident report.
That part.
It's an incident report.
I wrote a cozy romantasy that was supposed to be a super cozy romantasy that I had to write 3 different drafts of because the first one, they were fucking in chapter 6. And I was like, that's not cozy. That's not nice.
I mean, that's
I
amazing.
mean,
Cool.
it was
Part of a nice fire.
Cozy for me, but it doesn't fit the genre.
We can find the genre, man.
Hey, listen.
Oh my God, I don't know how to like pivot from that.
I'll leave. Bye.
Panel's over, go home.
My next question is for Porsha. Your main characters in Love Lost. I keep talking about Love Lost, but obviously it's not the only book that you have here that you've written. they deal with trust and insecurity issues. So how do you decide what conflicts that your characters go through, and what was hardest for you to write?
I think, so, like KJ just said, your characters kind of write themselves, and also you put a lot of yourself, the good and the bad, into your characters. So for Love Lost in particular, like Elise deals with trust issues and she has insecurities because of her weight, something that I have dealt with all my life. So that was part of what went in there, and dealing with someone that she made up in her mind after he left her, that she was good enough to bang but not good enough to actually be with. And so that was a lot of them trying to build the trust and get over those humps, especially throughout the first book. A little bit into the second, they get to a better place in the second, and then the third book is a whole nother. I wouldn't say I necessarily choose what insecurities they have, you know. Like I just said, they're incident reports. My characters are individuals who live rent-free in my head, and I have no control over these people.
Sometimes
So-
I should pay rent.
They really should. They really should. I have no control over these people, so when I'm writing, it's like their therapy session, you know. So you guys just get formatted and edited. Listen to their reports.
The way that as authors, we can fully afford to live on an author's income if these in our head paid rent.
Yes, my goodness,
Yeah.
my goodness.
I'd live comfortably.
Right?
So I think also trying to make sure your characters seem like they're real, even if, you know, they're humans, or if they're, you know, minotaurs or vampires or whatever else, you know, making them seem realistic to some degree there, and giving them those traits that you see either in yourself or your family members or, you know, your friends or whatnot. Like some of my most characters that I don't like the most, I picked up their traits from family members or friends that I do not like.
It's a cafeteria plan of character writing. I like their name, and I like their spunkiness, and their
Yeah.
bitchiness, and.
Yes, yeah. So, I wouldn't say necessarily choose, you know, what insecurities they have. Now, what struggles they may go through, especially as a couple, either they come up with that themselves, or, you know, I'm like, no, it'd be real interesting if he decided to sleep with her mama and she caught me.
That would be quite interesting. That would be interesting, yeah.
That happened in this one.
That is how you market it, everyone.
Came out of
So,
That's a very left field what if.
I'm a left-handed person, so.
Bye.
Again, I don't know how to pivot. You guys
Great
great moments. That's great.
Romance writing. She's taking notes, she's like never put these people together.
You'd think so, but they still put us together after February.
All right, well, my next question is for Meika. Hello. Who's your favorite character that you've created, and who's the hardest to write?
I'm gonna start with the second half of that question, because the
hardest
first
to
half
write,
is really hard to choose. The hardest to write was Birdie, the heroine was fun, because as I mentioned earlier, she's my first on-page queer character. Not only that though, like there's a lot of self-discovery here, like self-acceptance when like writing her character arc, but she's a secondary character in my third book. She's the annoying little sister in my third book, and everybody hated her. So when I decided to make her the heroine in my next book, it took a lot of work to make her likable. So, yeah, it's a big pain in the ass. I think it paid off though. She turns out pretty great, but I don't think I'd do that again. My favorite character, I feel like that changes day to day. Right now, I'm reviewing the audio files for my third book, So that heroine is my favorite. Her name is Sunny, and she's a snarky comic book artist. And she's just so cranky, and I really relate to that aspect of her personality. So right now, she's my favorite, but tomorrow it's gonna be somebody else. It's like asking me to pick a child. For a child, they don't have real children, but you know what I mean.
Alright, I think we have time for one audience question, one or two short ones, if anyone has any questions. If not, I have one last question I'd actually love to ask. Oh, Chris, yes, go ahead.
Do any of you like make playlists while you're working?
Yes.
Do you like listen to music?
Yeah.
Like,
That's actually
So-
like a form of plotting for me.
I don't listen to music while I'm writing, however, what I do notice is I'll listen to music and I'll be like,
It's that book.
I love this. This really fits the theme of that book. Oh, I have a whole chapter now.
Yeah.
There's the book that I'm working on right now. It's a romantic tragedy that centers around terminal illness and religious trauma. And I know, it's such a combination.
But it's a happy book.
Well, the entire thing ended up coming to about because I heard the song for the first time, and I do not remember the artist's name for the life of me, but the song is called Be Glad That I'm Not God. And I heard it, and I was like, this is stunning. Oh, the gays are pissed off. And then it just came from there. It literally flew out. And I was like, aw, now I have this whole little world, these cute little teenagers. Oh no, one of them gets yanked away. Oh no, they meet 10 years later. And it turns this whole thing, it's all because of one song.
Yeah.
It's amazing how, like, I've been inspired by so many different things, and I'll have, like, when I used to commute before COVID, and I now have to commute again, sadly, but, I would just, like, make voice notes, because I hear music on the radio, I hear Science Friday on NPR, and I'm like, ooh, that would be a good idea for a science fiction book, right? But, like, I have a book called Remember Me, Synthetica, and the initial idea, the spark of it, came from the song Synthetica by Metric. I was listening to it on the way to work, and I'm like, and it's just, the amount of times any author has had a book inspired by a song just because of either the lyrics or the vibe of it, right? It's just kind of interesting.
I really thought you were gonna say it was inspired by Remember Me from Coco.
That's what I thought you were gonna say too. I'm glad we thought the same thing, cause I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Like not even just plot though, like character wise.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's a song, one of my favorite artists is Matt Davidson, who's got a song called Disappear. And there's a line in it that's, I can make the good turn amazing and then disappear. So it's all about like fucking up your life, you know? And I took that element of that song and put it into one of my characters. You have to read my books to figure out which one it is, but.
I'm not gonna tell you.
One of them's rough.
I got your info, girl.
Sabrina, do you?
Yeah, for my book Smoke and Mirrors, the song Under Your Scars by Godsmack, that inspired the whole book. She was a side character in this book, and she was kind of broody, kind of moody. And so I developed this character for her, and she was a victim of attempted murder by her husband, and she's covered in scars, and she is tattooed all over all of them to hide that. And she's on this rediscovering herself and reinventing herself. And so that song was like a huge inspiration for that whole story.
Porsha, did you say?
So yeah, I definitely have playlists and stuff. This one in particular, this one was inspired, oddly enough, and it can sometimes just be the strokes of a guitar, because I tell you this song has nothing to do with this book, but Maria by Carlos Santana. It has nothing to do with this book, but legit the guitar solo, I was like,
Yeah.
it was solely just a vibe, and I was just like, that's sexy, hold on.
And that's, yeah, like the vibe of a song sometimes, not even specific notes or words. Yeah.
You can like a song and the lyrics are crap.
I guess it also doesn't help that Maria is an earworm. That is a song that, just the name, and you're like, oh, it's gonna be stuck in my head for the next 3 years.
Yes, Yes. See.
Awesome. Well, sadly, I think that's all we have time for our romance panel. But thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to our authors for being willing to talk about your writing process.